Okay, I will now call the hearing to order. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. This afternoon, on my far left is Mr. Whitbread, on my direct left is Ms. Davidson, and I will be chairing the hearing. My name is Mr. Hutchins, and our secretary today is Ms. Sutherland. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we would limit the discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by this Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed further to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with this Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following their swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by cross-examination by the appellant, and then the appellant's testimony followed by cross-examination by the assessor and then the panel members. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions based on the evidence presented here today. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. And, okay. So no cell phones used by anybody. Mr. Boardroom, I know you've got one on the table there. Two. Okay, for calculation and calculation purposes only. Would that be fair? Okay.
I don't expect I'll need to refer them. If I need to, I'll certainly
thank you.
ask your
all right.
permission.
Katie, could you please swear in both applicant and appellant? The appellant and assessor.
So, state your name.
Ken Wong.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and the truth?
Bradford Scott Boardroom.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Katie. Good afternoon, Mr. Wong, Mr. Boardroom.
Good afternoon.
First, property on the docket, I guess we've got one withdrawn. Okay, so number 2 on the docket is 297 Enfield Crescent, and we are dealing with a 2020 Realty Assessment Appeal. Mr. Wong, when you are ready, please.
The subject property is 297 Enfield. The roll number is 060-804-19000. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It's built in 1948 and has 11 suites with 6 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We use average rent of $661 to get a potential income of $87,000. Using 1.8% vacancy, you get an effective gross income of $85,000. Used a 49% expense ratio, you get a net operating income of $43,000. Capitalized at 4.9%, we have an estimated market value of $888,000, so $80,000 per unit. On page 4 are our rent comparables, showing that the rents used are in line with what's on the market. On page 5 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the owner. Their estimated operating income is about $45,000 based off of their income and expenses, which is a little bit higher than what the model is estimated at $43,000. On page 6 is information on how we derived our cap rates. The cap rates range from 4 to 7.3%, with the majority of them falling between 4.9 and 5.3%. On page 7 are some cap rate sales. As a small sample, we have a range of 4 to 6%, and on the bottom of page 7 is the sale at 540, which is about 4.07%. On page 9 are some pictures of the subject property with its location. Page 10 is some information on the subject property. Page 11 to 16 are the income statements provided by the owner. When you look at the actual performance of the subject property, it supports the model, and the model cap rate is in line with the market cap rates. They actually maintain the assessed value at $888,000.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Mr. Boardroom, any questions of the evidence presented by the assessor?
I do have a few, and in the interest of expediency, I'm wondering if the questions I ask generally at the beginning, you can apply to each property moving through.
Thank you.
To simplify matters. So, just as a matter of housekeeping, the department has in several recent instances altered income and expense questionnaires to bring forward before this board. I believe these are accurate. Can you confirm that these are all of the properties to date unaltered?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just for the record. What you're here today defending is all model-based, correct?
Yes.
So model rents. Yes. And model expense ratios. Yes. And so we don't look at the department's model for each individual property does not look at the individual line items specifically, correct?
The model does not know.
Okay.
It takes all the income and expense information that we have and
Goes on a band and away we go, right? So, similarly with the rents, rents include parking where it's present and laundry where it's present, laundry income where it's present, correct?
it includes other income, yes.
Yes. And that would include parking and laundry.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the model cap rates are derived from hypothetical rents, correct?
They're estimated rents based off of actual rents.
And so when we look at your page 6, just to confirm at the top of the second paragraph at the top of page 2, it says here that for the 2020 general assessment, capitalization rates were derived from model-generated estimates of net operating income. Those are hypothetical rents and hypothetical expenses, right?
They are estimated rents based off of actual rents.
You'd agree with me that all of the properties on today's docket fall under the rent control legislation?
I think so. A lot of them.
Okay, so let's talk about these properties specifically. Does this property fall under rent controls?
I'm not sure.
Don't know. Is that something that would influence a purchaser's estimate of ongoing incomes?
Potential.
Potential increases?
Potentially.
Okay, but you're not sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you familiar with the rent control legislation?
A little bit.
A little bit. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boardroom. Richard, any questions of the assessor?
No questions.
Thank you, Lori.
I have no questions at this time.
Thank you, and do I. Thank you, Mr. Boardroom.
Okay,
When you are ready, please.
Thank you. My intent today is to try and be as brief as possible. We have included within our information 3 separate items for each property. One will be our brief in principle, which includes the backup information from the owner's operating statements submitted to the city. As separate documents, we've also included for each property the apartment capitalization rate study. I know that each of you, or I'm quite certain that each of you have seen it before, and so I don't intend to go over it in great detail, but I will touch on some highlights. But I will tell you that we categorized or have categorized apartments in age categories, and the reasoning is contained within the capitalization rate study. And the older you get as a property, obviously, the riskier it is in terms of an investment. It has a smaller remaining lifespan. Its income producing potential is lessened, assuming the physical condition remains constant. And the third item we bring forward for each property is our repair and maintenance study. That is utilized just as a confirmation that our stabilized expenses in terms of the repair and maintenance are reasonable and in line with each property's age grouping. I can tell you that for each property we go through a quite extensive process in removing capital expenditures as reported repair and maintenance expenses. So our repair and maintenance expenses for each property may differ somewhat from the actual expenditures arising from our exclusion of capital expenditures. So for the first property, and in each property, given that the assessor has described the property, physically I don't intend to go through that, so I will ask you to turn to the last page in the brief, page 22, numbered at the bottom right-hand corner. This is our stabilization of the actual operating history of the property. I can tell you without hesitation that this property falls under rent control legislation. That means that we cannot assign hypothetical rents to it. Model rents, by law, cannot be applied or received by the owners. So in this case, as we go through the numbers, you'll see that our net operating incomes ultimately are very, very close to each other. At the bottom, if we look at line number 33, and so our difference here lies solely in the cap rate. Our view of a 4.9% cap rate for a building built in 1948. So more than 60 years old as of the reference date. In terms of the capitalization rate study, we just take a look at the study for a moment. I'll just go through the Coles notes of it. It was a separately filed document. We look at page 1. This is the Altus Group conclusions with respect to capitalization rates that we are presenting this cycle. And we compare them with the rates that the assessor has applied, generally speaking. Now, generally speaking, bear with me for 1 moment. For 1946 to 1946 cap rates, generally speaking, the department applies a rate somewhere between 4.6 and 5.3%. From our study, we conclude that a more appropriate rate, given these ages, is 6.25%. Now, there will be some adjustments to that. If, for example, the location is poor, I don't believe that any of the properties today have that, and so we have applied our 6.25% cap rate based on all of the evidence contained within our capitalization rate study. Just really briefly, page 2, we show what it was last cycle versus this cycle. Page 3, is a summary of the capitalization rates that we looked at for this cycle. Page 4 is a summary of the market reports that we reviewed, and I know that the department also looks at these as well. Page 5, we talk about vacancies. We generally speaking will look to the operating experience of the property. When it's excessively high, we certainly wouldn't stabilize that 0 or even 0.5% in perpetuity, which is what happens when you capitalize an income stream in a capitalization approach. So based on all of that, with the difference being primarily on the cap rate, we're seeking a reduction to $692,000. I know I went fairly quickly, but I have an answer.
Thank you, Mr. Borgstrom. Mr. Wong, any questions of the appellant?
Does the Altus Group produce a cap rate study aside from the one that you presented? Like a general cap rate study?
Our office?
Yes.
Well, certainly, I've done the industrial cap rate study. I know that we do office. I know that we do retail.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about like in terms of an Altus report for either public consumption or for other purposes other than tax appeals. Do you guys?
This is the report that we're presenting for property assessment purposes.
So you're for property assessment purposes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Thank you. Lori, any questions of the appellant?
I do have a question. You're using the cap rate of 6.25%, and you indicated that cap rates are a measure of risk, and I guess that would include location, age, condition, etc. The vacancy is only, that you utilized is only 1.8%.
That's correct.
Which seems pretty stable, even though it's an old building. So I'm just wondering why the 6.25%.
This is two parts, and so let me just back up for a minute. Capitalization rates need to reflect a return on and a return of your investment. And so the older a property gets, you have a shorter recapture period for the return of your investment. And so that will necessarily, for older properties, mean a higher cap rate. Now, we can quibble about or debate what that amount should be, but certainly past experience and even the assessor's model cap rates seem to indicate that older properties should attract somewhat higher capitalization rates. Now, the second part deals with your question about vacancy rates. Going back some period of time, CMHC established 2% as the equilibrium point, the point at which when vacancy rates fall below 2%, that will spur new construction, and you'll see that's actually happened in the market over the last quite a number of years now, and that's what we've seen in the Winnipeg market, where vacancy rates are higher than that and tend to be stifled. The other issue that's related to that is rent controls. Now, this property has not undergone the rehab process. It is not exempt from rent control legislation. So without very specific reasons, they are limited to the annually posted rent increase guidelines. Some properties will utilize the full amount of that, and then some won't, depending on their vacancy circumstances. They will make it discounts depending on that. In this particular case, because this property, when you look at page 22, we show 15, 16, and 17. So it looks to me like there is a, generally speaking, increasing trend. In the year closest to the reference, it's actually 3.9%. And we look at the 3-year average, including 0, that works out to 1.7%. We also know that it's not just vacancy rate that we need to consider, that owners separately report collection losses. Now, sometimes they're able to recover through legal means, collection agencies and so forth. Sometimes they're not. But in our view, we need to consider both vacancy and collection loss. And in this case, 1.8% applied by the city seemed reasonable to me for this building, and so that's why we applied at 1.8.
Okay,
That's a very lengthy answer to a two-part question, and I apologize.
thank you.
Thanks, Lloyd. Richard, any questions?
No questions, thanks.
Okay. Mr. Borgstrom, let's look at, okay, so I'm looking at your page 22, the actuals here. So you've got $11,000 more in income in the assessor's model.
Yeah.
And then,
About 11,000 more expenses as well. So
Yeah, so then we
our
end
net
up down
operating
here.
incomes are very close,
yeah, but the NOIs end up being
really close.
basically the same.
Yeah. And so the difference here, and I think I said that on the onset, lies solely in the capitalization rate applied.
Why are your expenses $11,000 more when the assessor did his stabilized on page 5 of his, he came in at $45,513. You're coming in at basically $10,000 more than his.
I can't speak.
Maybe you can't answer it.
Yeah, I can't speak to the assessor's work.
Yeah.
I can tell you, when you look, and we've included the statements here, I can tell you that when you look at the repair and maintenance supplies, so for example, if you look at page 20, you'll see there repair and supplies. But if you look above that, you'll see some other line items, and sometimes they get mixed in one, either by the department or by Altus, or depending on the way each owner reports them. But I can tell you without hesitation that the numbers that we show on our page 22 reflect what is reported by the owner, excluding the capital expenditures.
Mr. Wong, any comments? I mean, we do have the professional fee of, how much are we at, Mr. Borgstrom, how much are you adding in there, about 5,000, is that right?
For which?
For the professional fee?
Looks like 7,250, which would be the 3-year average. It was a significant expenditure in 2015.
And Mr. Wong, you don't accept those as an expense, is that right, or?
Well, $17,000 as an ongoing professional expense is probably not normal.
Which is, and frankly, that's why we tend to stabilize.
That's probably the main difference.
The municipal board has expressed on more than one occasion in its decisions their preference for utilizing a 3-year average to stabilize fluctuations or annual fluctuations, and that's
What you've done.
Yeah, and that's what we've done.
Okay, so it boils down to NOI being very similar. So we've got a difference in the capitalization rate of a little over 1.25%. So, have you visited this block?
I have not been inside any of these properties to my recollection. I've been doing this more than 30 years, so it gets a little fuzzy, but I don't think I've been in any of these blocks.
So I'm looking at your page 2, the picture of it, and I think you're basing your cap rate on the fact that it would be a 1948 building, but there's been no improvements. Would that be fair?
I would never suggest that there were no improvements, but if we take a look at our page 11, that's the income summary from the department's website. And you'll see there the department themselves use a 1948 effective year built on this property. I'm quite certain that there will have been stuff done over the years, but that's, if things were not being done in a 1948 building, it probably still wouldn't be an apartment building.
Yeah.
It would be shut down.
It's got a low vacancy rate. It's got a good location, close to the hospital, just south of.
I would agree with all of that.
Yeah, and
St. Boniface is not a bad location.
Yeah, yeah. Near a park. So
There's also a high density of competition in the area as well. So they're doing well to maintain their vacancy rate as it is.
It seems like a desirable block. That is, yeah.
Yeah, I have no doubt.
For the area.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that is my only questions. Mr. Wong, any requirement for summary?
I'd just like to, I guess, provide some regarding the
Oh, okay.
cap rate.
Oh, okay. Do you mind?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
Like you've seen this before, where it's just showing that the repair and maintenance used in the Altus cap rate study is about $629, and the repair and maintenance in the subject properties that are in appeal are typically higher, and in this case, they're about $1,311, with the difference being about $682 between the repair and maintenance used in the Altus cap rate study and the repair and maintenance used in the subject properties. Like they should be similar, and I guess that's the reason why I'm showing it, is that if you actually adjusted the repair and maintenance in the Altus cap rate study to be a more normal level, as in the case of the subject properties, the cap rates would actually be very much in line with what the city has for cap rates. So I just wanted to present that.
And this is relevant for all the rest,
Yes.
individual properties on the docket today, okay? All right. Mr. Boardroom?
Well, I have a couple of observations and then a couple of comments. One, the assessor has not provided the ages of these properties. I know the one on board is newer. I can tell you that every operation is different, and I didn't go through it, but I'm certainly happy to. As you go through our repair and maintenance study, you'll see that the repair and maintenance expenses are a very direct relationship to the rental rates that each building is able to achieve. And so when you look at the subject properties today, these are the actual repair and maintenance experience of each of these properties. And that's exactly the same exercise we went through in calculating the capitalization rates. The capitalization rates were calculated on the basis and stabilized on the basis of what was provided. So the operating statements at that time showed what each of the line item expenses were, and they've all been stabilized in exactly the same fashion. Every building, and even as you look at the assessor's list here, you can see that every building has different different repair and maintenance expenditures. So it's not, I mean, there was a time when you'd have an appraiser or even sometimes assessors come in and say, well, repair and maintenance shouldn't be $800 a square foot, it's $800 a unit. It should be $500 a unit across the board, doesn't matter where it is or what it is. That's not the reality of the market. When a property is exposed, a potential purchaser is going to come in, they're going to look at the expenses of the property, including repair and maintenance. They will do their stabilization in a fashion very similar, I would suggest, to exactly what we've done here today. It's exactly the same process we used in calculating our capitalization rates. I can also tell you that the capitalization rates we've calculated are based on actual income and expenses as compared with the city. And I'm questioning the assessor acknowledged that the capitalization rates, and they say it in their brief, it's on model rents, model expenses. They are not the actual, they are not calculated on the basis of the actual income expenses on each of those sales. certainly, it's been our approach over the site, over a number of, now I guess a large number of assessment cycles, to utilize this approach, and we'll do exactly the same thing going forward. Real incomes versus hypotheticals.
Okay. Mr. Wong, any comment?
Maybe a quick summary with regards to...
Actually, I have a question. So these are the Altus cap rate study. These are the actual
That's the repair
properties they
maintenance.
used in their cap rate
Yeah.
study, okay? Or, pardon me, repair and maintenance
Yeah.
study, okay? And you're saying that it's somewhat flawed, in your
It's
opinion?
not that,
And that would
it's just
actually
that,
drag down
if
their...
you're going to use low repair and maintenance to establish I would say a higher cap rate, then you should use those same figures. They should be representative of the properties that are in appeal. And I'm just trying to show that they're not really that representative of the properties in appeal.
Well, I frankly take umbrage at the comment that we use high repair maintenance. What we do is we stabilize the actual operating experience of the properties, whether they are the properties in appeal or whether they are the properties from which the capitalization rates are extracted. You cannot impose a repair and maintenance as one line item. You cannot impose the repair and maintenance expenditures from one property onto another property. Each property will have its own unique set of repair and maintenance expenses.
Well, to be fair, you both come up nearly at the same net operating income.
But we're talking here about the capitalization rates, and I think Mr. Wong is suggesting that somehow that the repair maintenance expenses applied in our capitalization rate study are inaccurate, and I can tell you that that's not the case. That we have utilized the actual reported repair and maintenance. We exclude.
I'm not saying it's not accurate.
Okay.
But basically, in the end, like the capitalization rates that the department has established, they're based off of income expenses from a lot of properties, and they're based off of all the sales. So basically, the capitalizations that we have are good estimates of market value, and our model has a assessment to sales ratio of 0.99 for income-producing properties. So basically, what that's saying is that the capitalization rates that we've utilized are good estimates of market value.
Or they're chasing sales, and I don't know the answer. But it's fair to say that what the assessor just said is exactly what I've said, that they've applied hypothetical expenses to sales, and just to remind the board, they don't use the actual sale prices. They use time-adjusted sale prices without any basis of evidence here before us. But you cannot impose expense ratios from one property to another property. The operation of an apartment building as an investment property, and that's what all of them are, simply doesn't work like that.
Okay. Okay. Richard, do you have any questions at all?
No, I think they'll come out.
Okay. Lori? Okay, then I'm good. Mr. Wong, you want a summary first? Okay. Mr. Bortson, we're good. Okay, so this is relevant for all the properties on the docket today, so please, you're going to have copies of these for every property in the docket, and you've got these reports for each. Okay, perfect. All right. Okay, so that ends 297 Enfield Street.
Subject property is...
1 second.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Bear with me for 1 second.
Yeah.
Get organized here. Okay, next property on the docket is 271 Traverse Avenue, and we're dealing with a 2020 realty assessment, and there's no issues other than that. Mr. Wong, when you're ready, please.
The subject property is 271 Traverse. The roll number is 060-751-15000. It's a residential apartment block that's 3 stories high. It's built in 1963 and has 16 suites with 14 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We used average rents of $573 to get a potential income of $110,000. We used a 1.8% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $108,000. And we used a 56% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $46,000. Capped at 4.9%, we have an estimated market value of $952,000. On page 4 are some rent comparables showing that the rents we've used are in line with what's on the market, maybe a little bit lower than the market. On page 5 is a summary of the income expenses submitted by the owner. Their estimated income is about $45,000, which is a little bit less than what the model is estimated at $46,000. On page 6 and 7 is information on how we derived our cap rates and some cap rate sales. On page 9 is a picture of the subject property with its location. The remainder of my brief are the income statements provided by the owner. So when you look at the actual performance of this subject property, it does support the model, and I have to maintain the assessed value at $952,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Boardroom, any questions?
Actually, just a couple. Mr. Wong, you'll agree with me with the general premise that an older property should attract a higher cap rate than a newer property?
Typically, yes.
Now, if I understand the model correctly, the department has applied roughly a range of 4.6 to 5.3 for properties built between 1946 and 1974.
It can be, yes.
Well, I'm asking you, is that the case?
It can be the case. It depends.
Depends on what.
I mean, in this case, you'll notice that some of the properties that have the lower cap rates are smaller in nature. So we've noticed that buildings that are smaller in nature tend to have a lower cap rate.
So if a building, when you say smaller in nature, you're talking about number of suites?
Size,
Is it number of suites or square feet?
square feet.
Okay. So the last property you dealt with, so let's come at this another way. Smaller square footage would typically accommodate a smaller number of suites, correct?
Yeah.
If a building has a smaller number of suites, for example, use as example 10 suites. One of those units goes vacant, you've automatically got a 10% vacancy rate, right?
Well, it depends how long it's vacant for.
Mathematically, if one suite goes vacant, you have a point-in-time vacancy rate of 10%, yes?
Yes.
If you have 100 suites and one suite goes vacant, you have a point-in-time vacancy rate of 1%, right?
Okay.
Doesn't the 10% or the risk of a single unit going vacant in a smaller building pose a greater risk than in a larger building?
Well, I'm not. In theory, that might be the case, but when you just look at the cap rates, that you're getting off into the side in terms of like the amount of risk involved with 10 units versus 100 units. But when you look at the sales of actual smaller buildings, they do have lower cap rates.
The last property we looked at was built in 1948, and in fact that's the effective age of the apartment unit, right?
That was the previous property.
Feel free to look at it.
Okay.
You recall that?
I'll take your word for it.
And the department applied a 4.9% cap rate to that one, right?
Okay.
Can you explain to me how the model can come up with exactly the same 4.9% cap rate exactly the same area for this building, which has difference between 11 suites and 16 suites?
Because the difference between 11 and 16 suites, or I would say it's not that different.
So-
And that difference in between a 1948 building and a 1963 building, they're actually very similar.
Okay. Within the model, where is the cutoff on size for groupings?
I don't recall all the sizes, but I believe on the smaller end of the range is 8,000.
Do you have that information with you?
No.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Lori, any questions of the assessor?
Quick question, I'm looking at your cap rate table on page 6. So for multifamily, low-rise A and B, at the 4.9 cap rate, which you're utilizing, is in the 20th percentile, sort of the low end.
Yes.
So is that typically all of these sort of very small apartments, both in terms of numbers of suites, square footage, and stories?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say depending on maybe the location and the age, that might have an effect on the cap rate as well. Even.
But your model, since this is the model,
Yeah.
so it is producing a 4.9 cap rate for all of these smaller apartments, regardless of what they're, well, not regardless of the area of town, but I mean,
As you noticed for like the previous property, I guess, which seems to be very similar in age, about 1948 and 1963, and it has the 4.9. Like it applies the cap rate, I guess, equally amongst all the similarly attributed properties, apartment buildings.
so then it's sort of reserved for this type of an apartment building, whether it's in like St. James, all those little ones along Portage or Enfield or...
Yeah, I think a lot of, there's only maybe one market region where the cap rates are a little bit higher, and that's probably just a little bit in the Selkirk and Center, North Main Street area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Richard, any questions?
I'm going to ask a general question first. In Altus's study, and I don't remember seeing it in your documents, in your evidence, they presented a grid based on age of buildings.
Yeah.
And the city had similar in pre-1946, but you started to go up from 46 to 56 and 60 to 79, while you're up thereafter over the Altus study for cap rates.
Yeah.
Do you agree that that grid is applied, the grid that was in their study, that this general grid put out by the city or based on the city's numbers is accurate?
I can't say whether his numbers are match up with what the city has presented or not, but I can tell you that the numbers that we have are accurate for assessment.
But you can't validate that the numbers Altus put in their study are the numbers the city uses.
I can't. I mean, I would have to go to the office and double check.
Okay, because we have had other assessors who have been able to tell us what the age break is, and then indicated there is a building size break as well on the thresholds.
Yeah, well, with regards to those ages and thresholds, we apply them equally, and based off of those application of those thresholds and ranges, they resulted in, I would say, accurate estimates of value on the model.
The model would grab those numbers and apply.
Yeah. So basically, if they were the same, if their two buildings had the same attributes, they would get the same cap rate.
And you as an assessor have the ability to go in and manipulate, not the model, but the number based on some information that is provided in the evidence? Could you say, that's not right. I know that area, I know that building itself, I was in there. It's not 4.9, it's actually a high-class building and it's 6.2. Can you do that?
I think we do have the ability to override attributes and if necessary, but we'd need strong evidence of it.
So you can take it up and you can take it down based on the evidence.
If there was a strong evidence to support it. Otherwise, we try to keep it at the model.
Okay. And if you were to change that number, you would tell us as you're going through your evidence, that, you know, the model said that should be a 5.25,
Yeah.
but looking at all the conditions, I make it a 4.9.
I mean, I don't think we do that. If you asked and we were able to tell you, we would say so.
You would tell us that in the hearing.
If you asked, and we, that's not typically, I would say the cap rates are the same. I don't.
That wasn't my question, but the question was, would you tell us
I would-
up front? You're
I would-
saying we have to ask.
Yeah, it's not something that we would say upfront, or it would just, yeah.
And we have had assessors do that.
Yeah.
Say, you know what, based on all the evidence here, I don't think that
Yeah.
5.25 is accurate. I made it 4.9.
Ye-
But you're telling us we should ask you.
If you would like, yes.
Yes. Answers-
As far as I know, it's not something
I
that we
appreciate that. Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, Mr. Wong, so we've got a sale, I guess it's post-reference, 2 months post-reference in August of 2018 at 1.85 million. You didn't mention it because it's post-reference by 2 months, is that right?
I didn't mention it because it's post-reference, and
I'm trying to figure out why it would be in the brief at all, frankly. It's the,
Well, it came up on the brief, so.
interestingly, what I'm told is that it auto-populates, but we've got a brief coming up, and a docket coming out for a property on 26 Hemel, which sold a few months after the reference date for a sale price much lower than the assessed value. The city hasn't included that sale price.
Okay. Well, in this case, we've got it, so that's what we're doing.
it does. I'll tell you how it is.
Okay.
Like I say, it does auto-populate,
Okay.
and sometimes we don't catch it.
Yeah.
In terms of a post-reference information. But I guess for myself, I can't speak for others, but I'm trying to be, I guess, a little bit better in that regard with regards to catching some of this stuff. So.
I mean, and you did mention it, and I did, and I think you did mention it because it's post-reference by 2 months. So I guess my next question would be, and I would have asked it without seeing this sale, post-reference sale, is that, have you visited this property? Have there been any improvements or permits taken out on it? So I noticed in your page 5, there's a bunch of different NOIs for 1 year and $55,000 management. When I look at the expenses, it looks like there was some kind of huge expenditure in the expenses on one of these. Or maybe it's just the property management fluctuating all over the place.
Yeah, I think it's the property management.
Okay.
And we could probably guess as to what they might be doing, but it would probably be a guess. And so I don't think it's productive or helpful.
Okay. Any permits taken out on the property
Not
that you're
that I know
aware
of.
of? Okay. And piggybacking on Mr. Whitbread's question, so when these assessments are prepared, preliminary values are prepared
Yeah.
for review by the property owners and yourself before the roll is struck, are these individually reviewed, these apartments?
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes, not all of them?
Not all.
Okay, you run reports and you come up with outlier flags, maybe, would that be fair to say?
Yeah,
Compared to last
we
year's?
do have reports, and we do try to review properties to make sure that the model is accurate as can be.
Yeah, and it's compared to the last cycle's final assessment value, maybe board adjusted or whatever the roll is changed to or in existence. The
Yeah,
report
we
will-
take a look at the property to try to understand what is going on with the property, and then if any adjustments are warranted, we can make adjustments.
Then you as the assessor would take ownership of that property and make a professional decision on whether to override cap rate, expenses, that kind of thing?
I believe would be our job.
Okay. I'm not sure if that's what you were asking, Richard.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. That's my question. Mr. Boardroom?
I have a couple of other questions arising from
Okay.
the questions from the board and Mr. Wong's answers. Firstly, a comment, I've got some properties coming up in the next week or so. I don't know what happens to the desktop reviews. These particular properties have gone up in the neighborhood of 60%.
Yeah, let's just deal with,
Owner-occupied.
but let's just deal with this
Yeah,
property.
so, I can't speak to desktop reviews. Mr. Wong, you've shown appropriately the post-reference sale price. Do you know if that's a multi-roll sale?
I do not know.
Now, in terms of the model, generally speaking, and I appreciate you can't give specific breakdowns because you don't have the information with you. One of the categories you indicated would be age, correct?
Yes.
And one of the categories would be building size, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, there is also a category that's been applied to other property types. Is there a, I don't want to call it a fudge factor, but an adjustment for, let's call it tenant quality, tenant appeal, building appeal, or even grade something poor, fair, average, good, very good? Does that exist in the model? Again?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure
So is there,
where you're going with this.
I'm asking a question
Okay.
about the model. So does the model have a characteristic attached to it whereby there would be adjustments for building or tenant appeal?
Yes.
And so that would fall into one of 5 different categories, right? Poor, fair, good.
It does
Poor,
have.
fair,
It does,
average. So 5 categories.
I don't really want to spend my time here going through all the all aspects of the model. It does, like if we have 2 buildings that are beside each other that are exactly the same, but one property performs better than the other, we do have the ability to reject that.
Is that ability done prior to the generating of the assessment rule, or is it
Yes.
done subsequent?
Prior.
When you say if one building is performing better than the other, does that mean the department actually uses the actual income expenses for comparison purposes?
We do look at how the property is performing, yes.
In terms of its actual income and actual expenses?
Yes.
And still we come in here with model. Sorry, that wasn't really a question.
You know what, maybe I'll ask a question and we'll clarify this whole model thing. Mr. Boardroom, okay? Mr. Wong, do you do the modeling?
I do not do the model.
Okay, do you know the specific details of the models that are being built?
Some, but not nearly. Not nearly.
And that's as I suspected and not unusual. I've also been advised that they're not allowed to ask questions of the modelers,
Wow.
which also brings into question the evidence being presented.
Okay,
So I'm just saying, particularly in the case of income-producing properties like these, where every apartment building is rented.
well, okay, general statement, Mr. Wong appears here to,
Defend the model, I guess.
well, not defend, no, to look at it and think whether it's right or not and make a decision whether he's going to defend the assessment or make a reduction. He's not here just to defend it.
We're here to support the model. We're here to try to get the market value.
Yes.
That is what we're here for.
Yeah. I don't think Mr. Wong is going to defend something that's indefensible, to be honest. But he's professional, he's going to have an opinion, just as you do, Mr. Boardroom. That's what we're here to listen to, right? In general, just to make a statement here. But to chase the model and the details, he can't answer this
I was
question.
only seeking clarification,
Yeah.
because I know I've gotten clarification on other ones.
Well, he doesn't.
And I know in terms of certainly a recent hearing on multi-res properties where there were buildings on the same street within a couple of buildings of each other, very different cap rates, which made no sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah,
Well,
but then the board decided what they were going to do with it based on the
Similar-
evidence presented.
Similar age, very similar
But
locations.
the board decided based on the evidence
Yeah.
what they were going to do with it,
I
right?
wish I could remember who was on the panel. Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Mr. Boardroom.
Okay, so, again, going with our page 17, we've gone with the actual income and expenses, stabilized. Higher income, higher expenses, again, our net operating income shown on line 33. Number on the left-hand side, very close to each other, so again, the difference is cap rate. One thing I did not touch on earlier, and I will now, just referring back to our capitalization rate study on page 1, we do have different age breaks than the departments. The department, from our information, goes from 1946 to 59, and then up to 74. The difference in the breaks for the department starts at 74 to 75, and you'll see that on page 1. We use between 1979 and 1980. That's based on the market. That's based on our interviews with owners. It's based on our interviews with property managers. That was around the time when construction started to change. And so that's why we used that as the logical bridging point for age groups in terms of differentiation. So the city's got some overlap with our age groups, so just as a clarification. So for those reasons, and utilizing our sort of age breaks, you recall the previous property was 1948, that's why the 6.25%. Mr. Wong says 15 years is not much of a difference. We'll test that going forward in some of these other properties where they're very close in age. And so based on the 1963 year of construction and our age groupings, we've applied our 6% capitalization rate, and we're looking for a reduction down to $797,000.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boardroom. So we've got similar NOIs, just a difference in the cap rate again.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Mr. Wong, any questions of the appellant's evidence?
No questions.
Thank you. Troy, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, Richard?
Just bear with me, please.
Shall I ask mine then?
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you didn't. That's okay. Okay, my only question, Mr. Boardroom, sorry. Where is your page one of your cap rate study? When you apply the ages, do you go by original age or variant age?
Variant.
Variant, okay. And if you...
Because that actually affects the effective-year build, right? So,
Yeah.
so certainly,
So
building,
would you-
for example, the Gordon Avenue Mental Health has on there, went from 1960s to late 70s, early 80s. We would apply the late 70s, early 80s age to them. That's the cap rate that we would apply.
So do you go by the city's age listed in the roll?
Typically, there will be some cases where we depart from that.
Okay.
But to be frank, I'm not aware of any of those in multi-res. Certainly, we do depart in other property types, and I have certainly this cycle and in past cycles as well.
And is there...
In fact, I had one the other day where, sorry to interrupt, where I don't know why the department, there was a building with an original age, 1960, say, and then a big addition in 1980. The city still had the original age of 1960. In my brief that I've now submitted to the Board of Revision, I estimated the effective year built as much greater than the city had applied in there.
Yeah, okay.
And I would go the other way as well, where the circumstances and facts warranted it.
So is there a condition modifier
It's not a modifier
applied?
per se.
Like that, so you would call something fair and that would affect?
No, we don't use
Okay.
modeling in that way. We've come up based on the actual income and expenses for the cap rate study.
And vacancy reflected of condition. Okay, okay, fair enough. That was my only question. Okay, thank you. Okay. Mr. Wong, summary? Oh, Richard, I'm sorry. You good? Okay. Any summary required? Okay, that concludes 271 Traverse Avenue. And we are going to take a 7-minute break, so we're back at about 1:15. I will now call the hearing back to order. Next property on the docket is 154 Horace Street, and we're dealing with the 2020 realty assessment. No issues. Mr. Wong, when you are ready, please.
The subject property is 154 Horse. The roll number is 060-909-33000. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It's built in 1959, but we have an effective year built in 1979. There are 6 suites with 6 outdoor parking stalls. On page 2 is the sales history of the subject property. It sold in January 2018 for $718,000. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We used average rents of $810 to get a potential income of $58,000. We used a 1.8% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $57,000. And we used a 42% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $33,000. At that 4.2%, we have an estimated market value of $788,000, $131,000 per unit. On page 4 are rent comparables, and that's we've used online and put on the market. On page 5 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the owner. Their estimated income is about $32,000, which is in line with what the model was estimated at $33,000. On page 6 and 7 is information on how we derived our cap rates, along with some cap rate sales. On page 9 is a picture of the subject property with its location. And the remainder of my brief are the income statements provided by the owner. So the actual performance of the property supports the model, and the sale price is a little bit lower, but I feel it is in line with the model. So I ask you maintain the assessed value at $788,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Boardroom?
Thank you. You've indicated on your page 2 that the property sold in January 2018, correct?
Yes.
And reported sale price there, you show the $718,000.
Yes.
If it had been reported as, say, $250,000, would you make a recommendation on that basis?
I'd look into the sale.
Look into the sale. Did you have an opportunity to look into the sale?
No.
Do you know, the department typically sends out sales verification forms for each and every sale,
Yes.
correct? Do you know if that was done in this case?
Yes.
Did you have a chance to review it?
Actually, I did not review it, no.
You didn't look at it at all?
No.
Turn to your page 7, sorry, page 6. Now, these are the department, the grid here is the department's model capitalization rates, and the second from the bottom grid, if you will, shows the multi-res rates, correct?
Yes.
Now, the department shows an original age on this property of 1959, correct?
Yes.
And it's obviously undergone some renovations, so the department has now assigned an effective age of 1979, correct?
Yes.
So if we take a look at your page 6, the 20th to 80th percentiles, the bottom end of the 20th percentile is 4.9%. That's for all apartment buildings, correct?
Yes.
Now, if we look at the range in total in the columns beside that, they range between 4.0 and 7.2% for all apartment buildings. That's the range, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain how the model generates 4.2% on a building with an effective year built 1979? That would be for the best, 4.0 would be the best of the best, the newest. How does it generate 4.2 as a model rate?
I guess that's what the sales information is telling us.
Okay, and so in your experience, certainly coming to this hearing, doesn't 4.2% seem to indicate that an adjustment might be necessary given its year of construction and even its effective year build?
No, I've seen sales that support this.
The department, let's come at this another way. So when sales verification questionnaires, and you indicated one was sent out to this property, yes?
Yes.
And you also indicated that you did not review it, correct?
Yes.
If a sale is, for example, not arm's length, is it flagged somehow by the department?
Yeah.
Do you know if this one was flagged?
Yeah.
Was it flagged?
Yes. It was. They apparently the last names of the owners were the same, so they didn't include it for analysis.
And so you've indicated the sale price without disclosing that fact, correct?
I did not state it. No.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori, any questions of the assessor?
Just a quick question. So does that mean it's not an arm's length sale?
I believe
I will
it
be.
is not a.
Sorry, I will be providing the sales questionnaire.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, I don't believe it's an arm's length sale. I should.
You did mention it.
I didn't mention it. Sorry.
Richard, any questions?
I do, I'm just making a note here. And I'm sorry to hammer this at you so often, but I look at your information on page 6, and it shows a 4.0 to 7.3, with a 4.9 at the 20th percentile, up to 5.3 across the board to the 80th percentile. I look at 1979 as an effective date, and it tells us 4.2 to 5.0. So again, the model would go in, it would make that assessment and plug that 4.2 into the...
Yes. Based off
Into that.
based off of the attributes of the building, it would do this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I say we try to treat everything as equally as we can.
No further questions.
Thank you. And I have no questions. Mr. Borkson, when you're ready, please.
Well, I do have some rebuttal first. I'm going to give this in copies. As the copies are being prepared, I'm going to just give what these I didn't bring them. It's a 2-page document. So,
It's a 2-page document.
yeah, she took the second page and left the first one. There you go.
Oh. Okay.
Or you can ask nicely if you want me to make copies.
Thank you.
So this is the sales questionnaire that was...
It is.
Okay.
And I'll get into the questionnaire, but I'm confused as to how the assessor can mention the sale and then only when...
That was a mistake to mention the sale. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
you
I think
indicated
we're
that-
going to get information to
Yeah.
say,
Well,
so leave it at that. How's that?
You indicated that you hadn't reviewed the questionnaire.
Yes.
If I might just for a moment.
Yeah, I think we're...
Okay. Just trying to respond to an email here.
I think we're on pace for 6 o'clock.
Well, I keep hoping, or that my optimism will prevail here.
You've got one.
Thank you. So, oops, sorry. Are we still 5 line?
Yeah.
Oops, okay. So as we go through here, and I will draw your attention on the first page to line item number 3, which asks, was this sale an arm's length open market transaction? And the answer is no. And if we go to the second page, and we look at line item number 32, was the purchase price based on the property's net operating income? The answer is no. We go back to the first page and we go to the top under property owner. That's the current property owner who this questionnaire was sent to, and then vendor. You'll see there that it's Adam Carrier and the vendor was Brenda Carrier. So this is a transaction between parents and their son. So this is not an arm's length transaction. It should have been properly disregarded. The assessor has already indicated that it was flagged as not arm's length in his evidence. Not quite sure why he wouldn't review the sales questionnaire after acknowledging that it was flagged as not arm's length. So in any event, it's a sale price that should properly be disregarded. Turning to, or I guess I can have to answer any questions about that.
Okay. Mr. Wong, any questions? Or you had time to review this? Okay.
Yep.
Richard, any questions? Okay. Laurie? Okay. Mr. Boardroom, quickly, number 5 on the questionnaire. So we're showing the local credit union providing a mortgage. I'll leave the details out. But the question is, was there a market appraisal or opinion of value? Was there an appraisal done by the credit union, I guess, and it is stipulating an amount there?
Yeah, I don't know who prepared it.
Well, I would assume it'd be the mortgagee.
Well, and I don't know.
Okay.
So a purchaser wouldn't do their own appraisal. I'm not sure if the credit union did or did not, and I'm not sure the basis for that, for the valuation that they came up with. So without knowing who did it, or having them here to answer questions about that, certainly there are ample municipal board precedents that such things are disregarded. They will look for factual information in appraisals only. Municipal board does not accept, without the presence of the appraiser, does not accept appraisal reports, period, nor do they compel the production of such documents.
Okay. Just to confirm, is it $765,000?
Or 705, I'm not sure.
And it's a 80%, 80% mortgage? So one would assume it would be the financial institution that would get an appraisal, one would assume, on the property before giving a mortgage that large, I would think. But we don't know. Okay, fair enough.
As I said, I don't know.
You know, okay.
Certainly in terms of the standard approach that we're taking, we're coming in with a very different value on this property.
Yeah, okay. It's just, my question is, when a mortgagee is going to give that kind of a mortgage on a property, surely there's going to be some kind of indication of value or verification of value other than the sworn value from a family, I would think anyway.
Or undertakings, personal undertakings given on the mortgage amount. We don't know the answer to that.
Well, it says a cash down of approximately,
Yeah.
we're going to call it, what, 15%? 20%? 20%. Yeah.
But again, we don't know what the personal undertakings were on the mortgage end of it. We don't know whether there was a co-signer or other collateral put up. So frankly, we just don't know.
That's my only question. Okay. So, Mr. Borkson, when you're ready,
I can
please.
also tell you that this board, in a recent hearing on 230 Panic, completely disregarded the sale price, which was lower than the assessed value
Wow.
within 12 months of the preference date.
We weren't there to see.
I
this.
understand that.
Okay, would you like to present?
Consistency.
Okay. 154 Horace, please.
So again, turning to our page 16, and you'll see there, we have stabilized on the same basis as the other properties. 1.8% vacancy, our income is higher. Again, our expenses are lower. Our net operating incomes, again, are very close to each other. The 4.2% cap rate that the city's model has applied here doesn't make sense for a building with an effective age of 1979. This isn't a building built in 2015, which would attract the low end of the range of 4%. It just makes no sense at all. So you'll see there at the top, directly under the word history, is an effective or a year built of 1959 and an effective year built of 1979. And this comes back to the question you asked previously, where we accepted the 1979 effective year built. You look at our capitalization rate ranges that we show on our page 7 in this brief. For buildings built for age categories 1960 to 1979, 6%. If it was the older age of the building that we were applying, it would be 6.25. But you see here on page 20 or on page 16 that we've actually applied 6% reflective of the building's effective year built. So based on that 6% cap rate and the stabilized income and expenses, we're looking for a reduction to $563,000 based on the economic performance of this property.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wong, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Lori, any questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you. Richard?
No.
All right. Mr. Borkstrom, you know what I'm going to ask you, I think. Page 2 of the sales questionnaire, they declared that they paid interfamily $718,000. One would assume based on a market.
I don't assume that at all.
No, no?
No.
Okay. So why did they,
It's very clear from, sorry, just to clarify.
Okay.
It's very clear when we look at line number 3 that they've indicated that this is not an arm's length open market transaction and that it is in fact between related parties.
okay,
So, and again, we don't know what undertakings and personal covenants were given with respect to the mortgage.
so you're saying your declaration of the selling price that is not accurate? That's
I'm
no
saying-
indication of market value.
I'm saying for our purposes,
Okay.
we are going with an income approach.
So they had an appraisal done by somebody that's coming in at $150,000 more than you're asking, $150,000 more,
Well,
and a declaration of about $70,000 more than what you're asking. So you're saying we should ignore this sales questionnaire completely, the numbers on here?
I'm saying that the sales questionnaire establishes that this is not an arm's length transaction, that it's between family members. I'm I'm saying we do not have the appraisal report or the appraiser in front of us. We don't know what undertakings were given, what personal covenants were given on the amount of the mortgage. And so with all of those details, frankly, it's an income approach that should be applied.
I do have a question.
Okay, so when they establish an income tax value on this property, would they not use these figures? Possibly.
Who knows?
Yeah, okay. All right. That's my questions. Richard?
Yeah, I'm looking at the market value of this property, 131,333. Sorry, market value per suite.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, sorry. When I compare that to the previous two properties that we looked at 80,000 and 59, 60,000, it's a very similar kind of building. It's
been renovated, and so it's been renovated. It's a building that will have undergone a rehab, and so it will be generating higher per suite rents arising from that rehab.
Did you visit the building?
I have not.
Yeah. So you can't comment on the interior.
Well, typically, what I can do is comment on the process involved in that. And the residential tenancies branch became very, the requirements changed from when people first started undergoing the process of rehabs. And it evolved as the number of apartment buildings affected increased substantially, and it became concerns about affecting the rental market. I can tell you that the renovations need to be significant in order to qualify for the exemption from rent controls and to qualify, so to qualify for the higher rental rates. So it wasn't just a matter anymore of doing kitchen cupboards and replacing appliances. It became much more involved in that, generally involved flooring, so we're looking for fixtures, typically kitchen cabinets, very often windows, are all things that would be required by residential tenancies to qualify for the, we'll call it the rehab program.
And when you look at the statement of receipts and disbursements, it's not a heck of a lot of money showing in previous years. There's a large remittance to owner, but we're not seeing an ongoing support to the building. So I don't have a question. I'm just making a comment.
Yeah, no, and you know what, the income and the expenses are what they are. They're actually reported.
Yeah. Thank you. No questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wong, summary required?
Sure. I guess their market value appraisal, that's kind of what we're looking for, is the market value. Their market value appraisal is at about $765,000, and using our 4.2% cap rate, we're coming in at $787,000. So I feel that our estimated value is accurate, and I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $788,000.
Thank you. Mr. Boardroom?
I think that the points have been made and don't need to be repeated, although I'm happy to if you prefer.
No, that's okay. You've been very clear. All right, okay, so we'll leave that one. That concludes 154 Horace Street. Next property on the docket is 301 Horace Street. Mr. Wong, when you are ready, please.
The subject property is 301 Horace. The roll number is 060-804-280-00. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It was built in 1968 and has 17 suites with 15 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $828 to get a potential income of $168,000. We use the 1.8% vacancy for an effective gross income of $165,000. And we use the 45% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $91,000. Capped at 4.9%, we have an estimated market value of $1,862,000, which goes $109,000 per unit. On page 4 are rent comparables, and that the rents used are in line with what's in the market. On page 5 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the owner. Their estimated income is about $89,000, which is in line with what the model is estimated at $91,000. On page 6 and 7 is information on how we derive our cap rates and cap rate sales. On page 9 are some pictures of the subject property with its location. The remainder of my brief are the income statements submitted by the owner. When you look at the actual performance of the subject property, it does support the model, and I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $1,862,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Borgstrom, any questions?
I do not, thank you.
Lori, any questions?
I have no questions.
Richard?
No question.
I have no questions either. Mr. Borgstrom, when you're ready, please.
Okay, so on our page 16, I'll let you go through the pictures of the property. It's your classic 2.5-story walk-up, 1960s vintage. We've gone through the process, as with the other properties, of stabilizing income and expenses. Our net operating incomes are above $100 per live in the city. The capitalization rate there should read 6% by its age, and our page 7 table, so this is 1968, it should be 6%, and so our request is for a reduction to $1,507,000. It's revised based on the 25 basis points difference.
Just to summarize, to confirm, you're revising your cap rate to 6%
6.0.
and resulting in a requested value of $1,507,000.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. Mr. Wong, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Lori, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Richard?
No questions.
And I have no questions either. Mr. Wong, summary required? And Mr. Borgstrom?
Thank you.
You good? Okay. Thank you. That concludes 301 Horace Street. Next property on the docket is 301 Enfield Crescent. Mr. Wong, when you are ready, please.
The subject property is 301 Enfield. The roll number is 060-804-18000. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It was built in 1948 and has 11 units with 6 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. Use average rents of $753 to a potential income of $99,000. Use a 1.8% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $97,000. And we used a 45% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $53,000. That's at 4.9%. We have an estimated market value of $1,097,000, $99,000 per unit. On page 4 are our rent comparables, and that the rents we've used are in line with what's on the market. Page 5 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the owner. The estimated income is about $52,000, which is in line with what the model has estimated at $53,000. Page 6 and 7 is information on how we derive our cap rates. And some cap rate sales. Page 9 are some pictures of the subject property with its location. And the last few pages are the income and expense mailers submitted by the owner. So when you look at the actual performance of the subject property, it supports the model, and I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $1,097,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Borgstrom, any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Lori, any questions?
No.
Richard? No. And I have no questions either. Mr. Borgstrom, when you're ready, please.
Okay, again, on page 22, this is another property built in 1948. In this particular case, it's owned by the brothers that do their own repair and maintenance work. They're contractors, and they do their own repair and maintenance work. And so we have made an adjustment to reflect their time. Certainly that's an established and recognized approach, certainly for properties that I've done at municipal work, where you need to acknowledge the value of the owner's time. If they hire contractors, it would be every bit as much of what we've stabilized at. So we've increased the 3-year average by about 1/3. That works out to $12,654, and we highlighted that in red to point it out to you. That works out to $1,150 a suite. We take a look at the repair and maintenance study at page 13, and you can take my word for it, you can turn to it. These are for low rises built between 1946 and 1949. We show there, I should have described it earlier, this is, repair and maintenance study is what I would describe as a living document. As we hear properties, we add them into the repair and maintenance studies so that we can disclose them more fully. Certainly as of the date that these were prepared, we had a number of low-rise buildings built between 1946 and 1959, not rehabbed, and the repair and maintenance per suite, if you look at the ranges, between $859 per suite, that's the stabilized repair maintenance, between $859 per suite per year, all the way up to $1,703 per suite per year. $1,100 is at the somewhat lower end of the range. Somewhere between the middle and the lower end of the range. It's a reasonable allocation for the owner's time. So we've gone, again, income slightly higher than the city, expenses significantly higher than the city's 45% allocation for a building built in 1948. And so based on its age grouping and the north of $5,500 difference in net operating incomes, we think the right cap rate is 6.25 in this case, so we're looking for a reduction down to, $768,000.
Thank you, Mr. Borgstrom. Mr. Wong, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. Lori, any questions?
No questions.
Richard, any questions?
No.
Okay. And I am good. Mr. Wong, any requirement for summary?
No.
Mr. Borgstrom?
Thank you, no.
Okay, thank you. That concludes 301 Enfield Crescent. Next property on the docket is 250 St. Anne's Road. We're dealing with a 2020 realty assessment. And Mr. Wong, it would appear, has a recommendation on the property, revising the value downwards. Mr. Wong, could you explain and summarize why you made that recommendation, please?
Sure. When I looked at the actual performance of the property.
Sorry, would you mind reading in the roll and everything?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go through everything and then I'll get to it.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
okay.
Thank you.
The subject property is 250 St. Anne's. The roll number is 080-020-205-00. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It was built in 1961 and has 6 suites, 6 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We have the model estimated an operating income of about $40,000. On my page 5 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the owner, and I've estimated their operating income to be $36,000, so I'd like to provide a revised recommended value of $714,000. The remainder of my brief is similar to my others with regards to the cap rate and some pictures, as well as the income statements that's submitted by the owners.
Do you have a revised workup for us?
Yeah, it's on page 5.
Page 5, okay.
On the bottom of page 5.
Right, okay. Same cap rate, okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Borgstrom, I don't know if you've had time to review this, but if you want to take a minute.
Well, we're headed the right way. We're still about $3,000 too high on the net operating income, and our view of the model cap rate at 5.1 is still too low.
Okay, so you're not accepting.
We're headed the right way, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any questions of the assessor, Mr. Borgstrom?
I do.
Take your time, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
Probably reviewing here.
So, and I appreciate the recommendation, I really do. I'm again a little confused about the 5.1 cap rate. You indicated that earlier that the size was a major influencing factor. This location at 250 St. Anne's would also be considered a fairly good location, right? Is that a yes?
I would say so.
And so here we're talking about a gross floor area of 9,360 square feet, yes. Now, on our previous one, we're 12,000, so larger at 4.9%, for 12,813 square feet. You indicated that size was a factor. Can you explain the difference how the model generated 4.9 for a larger building and a higher cap rate for a smaller building?
In this case, I'm not really sure. I'd have to look into it.
Fair enough. That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Lori, any questions of the assessor?
No, I have no questions.
Thank you. Richard?
No.
And I have no questions either. Mr. Borgstrom, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. Page 25. So again, built in 1961. Our model, our capitalization rate grid indicates 6%. I appreciate that the assessor has reduced the net operating income down from the model rates, but when we look at our stabilized net operating incomes, we're at not quite $34,000. So it's headed the right way. It's just still excessive. We don't stabilize a single year of income because of potential hiccups involved. We utilize the practice of stabilizing typically 3 years to smooth out any anomalies. So that's the basis of our $33,748. And for the reasons already discussed ad nauseum, 6% is the cap rate, so we're looking for reduction to $562,000.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Borgstrom. Mr. Wong, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. Lori, any questions of the appellant?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you. Richard?
No.
And I have no questions either. Mr. Wong, requirement for summary? Okay, thank you. Mr. Borgstrom? You good? Okay, that concludes 301.
And you were pessimistic about
250 St. Anne's Road, pardon me.
Moving along.
Okay, next property on the docket, 410 St. Anne's Road. And we're dealing with where was he here? 2020 realty assessment, no issues.
Sir, can you describe the wall?
Oh, of course, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Wong. I'm going to be starting 410 St. Anne's Road. When you're ready, Mr. Wong, please.
The subject property is 410 St. Anne's Road. The roll number is 080-030-225-00. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It's built in 1968 and has 18 suites with 18 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We use average rents of $909 to get a potential income of $196,000. Use a 2.6% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $191,000. And we use the 56% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $82,000. Capped at 5.3%, we have an estimated market value of $1,558,000, which is about $86,000 per unit. On page 4 are some rent comparables showing that the rents we've used are in line with what's on the market. On the bottom of page 4 are some expense comparables showing the expenses for typical apartment buildings. The range is about 43 to 53%. On page 5 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the owner. If you look at their operating expenses for 2017, it is very high. Their income is about $192,000. Their expenses are about $163,000. So their expenses are high. I'm not sure why, but to try to stabilize their income, I used the model's expense ratio of 56% to estimate their operating income to be at about $82,000, which is in line with what the model is estimated at about $82,000. And the 56% is at the a little bit at the higher end of the range for apartment buildings, so I feel it's a fair ratio to use. So that's where that calculation came from. On page 5, 6 and 7 is information on how we graph our cap rates and some cap rate sales. On page 9 is a picture of the subject property. The remainder of the brief are the income statements submitted by the owner. So when estimating their operating income using a reasonable expense ratio of 56%, it supports the model, and I ask you to maintain the assessed value at $1,558,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Borgstrom, any questions?
I do, actually. Mr. Wong, typically, if you are doing a valuation on property, multi-res property, you wouldn't ordinarily look at a single year of income expenses, right? You'd look at more than 1 year.
Typically.
And that would be at least 3 years and perhaps more.
It can be, yes.
Did you go through that exercise with this property? You made particular note of the actual expenses and income of this property for a single year.
Yes. I did look at it, and I made, and like I said, I made note that the expenses are fairly high for 17. They're over $4,000 a unit, and for 2016, it's $4,300 per unit. So I'm not privileged to the details of that number, so I'm not able to determine if there's any sort of capital expenditure in there. But that's why I use the 56%, because it is a reasonable market number to use for this property.
And it's fair to say that you didn't request a detailed breakdown, correct?
I did not.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Borgstrom. Lori, any questions?
No, I have not.
Thank you. Richard?
No, fine, thanks.
And good to Mr. Borgstrom, when you are ready, please.
Thank you. I'm going to start by telling you that this is one of the properties, we do them for all properties, but in this particular case for this client, we actually do ongoing running totals of the breakdown from detailed statements of all of the repair and maintenance expenses. Now, in this particular case, I've got them running from 2013 to 2017. So when I'm telling you that we exclude CapEx, or capital expenditures, from the stabilized numbers, that's exactly what we're doing, and I can tell you exactly by line items which one we're doing. I don't do it, thank goodness, but I can tell you that it is a lot of work for people in our office to go through that to ensure that we do not include capital expenditures, and to ensure that what we arrive at is an accurate reflection of the actual repair and maintenance expenses that should be applied to each property. In this particular case,
Mr. Borgstrom, do we have that in your brief?
it's not in my brief, but it's backup documentation.
Okay.
And I can tell you, as we look at on page 15, line 27,
Okay.
you'll see there that the actual or the total repair and maintenance expenditures are significantly higher than what we stabilized at. And that's the reason for the difference, is that we've gone through this laborious process of excluding capital expenditures. Now, $33,117 still works out to $1,840, but that is the repair and maintenance required, stabilized in this property, excluding capital expenditures. So that's the actual operating experience of this property. So it's another reason why it's very dangerous to broadly apply ratios like 56%. So our income, notwithstanding a much higher vacancy and collection loss rate, is higher than the city's model. You'll see there that it's actually experienced from 2015 to 2017 when you include the bad debts as well. The average being 7.1% for vacancy and just shy of 0.5% for collection losses. We stabilize at 6%. We still end up with a number about $7,000 higher than the city's income. We go through the same process, stabilizing the expenses, and we're about $12,000 higher. So ultimately, when you look at the two things, we are in fact about $4,500, give or take, less in net operating income than the city's model. That's based on the stabilized repair and maintenance, excluding the CapEx. Again, that 5.75 should read 6% based on our table shown on page 7, given the subject property's age of 1968. So the revised request is to $1,301,000 based on that stabilized net operating income and a 6% cap rate.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Wong, any questions of the appellant? Take your time.
So 6% and 1,301,000?
Yeah.
No questions.
Thank you. Okay. Lori, any questions of the appellant?
What is driving the vacancy rate so much higher than what the city's model is?
Well, I can tell you that this property is not only managed but owned by a very large generational family within the city. They manage an extensive portfolio of not only their own properties but also properties owned by other parties as well. This is an area of very high competition. If you've driven down St. Anne's Road, there's a lot of apartment buildings in this area. That would be the only thing that I can attribute it to. But if it could be cured, I can assure you that these folks would have done it a long, long time ago. It's what the market is in this area, and that's been the operating experience of this property.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
Richard?
No questions?
Okay. First of all, Mr. Boardroom, location.
Yeah.
Is this the one across from the 7-Eleven?
Cortem, I don't know for sure.
I was looking at your site map there. And, don't know why I think that, but anyway,
I wouldn't.
it's on the corner.
Yeah, if you look at page 3,
Yeah.
if you look across the street, 7-Elevens typically don't have parking at the rear, so that would be, across the street would be a back lane on St. Anne's Road.
Right.
So typically 7-Elevens would have parking in front. My guess would be that's in another parking building.
Okay.
And another one beside it. This is a densely populated multi-res area.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to inquire about on page 15, the repair and maintenance, why it jumps up $30,000 a year for 2 years there, and then the vacancy.
So, sorry, repair and maintenance,
Yeah, repair line 27.
yes.
2015, it was $43,000 approximately.
Yep.
Then 2016, it's $77,000 approximately.
Yep.
Then 72.
Yep.
And then we see a jump in the vacancy rates. Well, not so much for 2016, but 2017. So why does it jump up $30,000 a year for 2 years?
It's a good question. I
Like
do
you
not
said,
know-
you've got your detailed.
Yeah, I do.
expenses. And you're stabilizing it at 64.
Yeah, and so the general building expenses, and I'm just going by line, you know what, I'm happy to show this to you.
No, it's okay.
Okay,
Yeah, verbal.
so there were capital purchases and, let's get at this another way. Carpet maintenance for 2016 and 17, respectively, 14,300 and 18,000, almost 900. We stabilize that at 2,600. So it's pretty clear to us that that's more than just periodic replacement. So we have, based on previous years, allocated 2601 as periodic replacement, not CapEx. Electrical maintenance for 2017 jumped up from 5,500 to 12,300. We've stabilized at 3,100. Okay. Painting and decorating, again for 2016 was 13,300 and change. 17 was 13,400 and change. We've stabilized at 4,900. So to us, it seems like wasn't a periodic thing, that it was a wholesale painting of perhaps the outside of the building or the hallways, the common areas. So we've stabilized it. Parking lot maintenance is nominal. Janitorial supplies, same thing. Plumbing repairs look periodic to us, and so we have total for 2016. We have 73, 76, 842 for 16, 72, 85 for 17, and so we reduced that certainly by the amounts that I've indicated. So with the high amounts, we've stabilized at much lower amounts to reflect periodic.
So 33,000.
Yeah. So that works out to about 1,840 per suite.
Okay.
Excluding all of the cabinets.
Okay, that's my only question. And to confirm, you're asking us to revise the cap rate to 6% and a revised value of $1,301,000.
Yes, thank you.
Rounded, okay. All right, Mr. Wong, any requirement for summary?
No.
And Mr. Borgson?
I do not.
You're good? Okay, thank you.
I don't know what good, but I don't need to sum.
Next property on the docket is 11 Lindale Drive. We're dealing with the 2020 Realty appeal, and No other issues, Mr. Wong, when you are ready, please.
The subject property is 11 Lindale. The roll number is 060-912-46000. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It's built in 1955 and has 16 suites with 6 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We used average rents of $691 to get a potential income of $132,000. See the 1.8% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $130,000. We used the 49% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $66,000. Capped at 4.9%, we have an estimated market value of $1,350,000, which is about $84,000 per unit. On page 4, rent comparables. The rents we've used are in line with what's on the market. Page 5 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the owner. Their estimated operating income is about $62,000, which is a little bit less than what the model is estimated at, $66,000. Page 6 and 7 is information on how we direct our cap rates and some cap rate sales. Page 9 is some pictures of the subject property with its location. The remainder of the statement, the remainder of my brief are the income statement submitted by the owner. So their actual performance is $62,000, and the model is estimating $66,000. I believe it's in line with the model, and I ask that you maintain the assessed value at $1,350,000.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Boardroom, any questions?
So if we take a look at your page 5, you'll see there reported incomes for 2015, 16, and 17, and that's the effective gross income, correct?
Yes.
Now, if we take a look at the model effective gross income, that's significantly higher than the actual in place, correct?
Yes.
Is that not something, given rent controls, that should be adjusted for? The effective age is still 1955, and so it's clear it's not undergone a rehab, right?
I don't know.
If you visually look at your picture of the exterior, or you don't have the picture I do, it's clear, is it not, that this property has not undergone a rehab. So the department has not amended the effective year built, correct?
Yes, correct.
But they did on a property earlier, stock it arising from a rehab.
Correct.
So given that the rents in here, the actual rents in here are so much lower than the model, is that not something that you should have taken a look at on a site-specific basis?
Well, the model estimates operating incomes, and in this particular case, it estimated that the model rents are higher, but the expenses are a little bit higher as well.
About $8,500 higher, right?
Yes. So when you look at what the operating income that the model is estimated, it is in line with what the actual performance is, and so you can try to get into the details, but it gets kind of you get lost all over the place. But when you look at what the model is estimated in terms of operating income, it is in line.
So you've applied, if I'm looking at your page 5, you've sort of applied a more consistency here. You've looked at only the 2017 income, but it looks to me like you've averaged the 2015 to 17 expenses, yes?
Yes.
Should you not do it one way or the other and not combine them? Either use a single year or use a 3-year average?
Typically, you would expect their last year's income to be a reasonable indication of what it might achieve in the future. but to try to stabilize the expenses, I use the 3-year average.
So you're suggesting that the not quite $4,000 difference in actual and model is not significant?
I would say it's in line.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. Lori, any questions of the assessor?
Just a quick one. I'm not seeing the rent roll in here, but it says the average monthly rent per unit is $691, and they're all one bedrooms. What is the actual rent?
Actually, I do not know. I did not. I'm not sure if I didn't include it because it wasn't available, or if I just didn't include it because sometimes the rent rolls are just a lot of paper. I'm not sure.
Can we tell from looking at the income statement?
Unfortunately, if it put a vacancy number in there, we would be able to tell, but in this particular case, it doesn't have it, so. But maybe the applicant might know a little bit more, but unfortunately, the information I provided doesn't have that.
Okay, thank you.
Richard?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, I did a calculation based on Mr. Borton's question. I took your, I'll call it revised work up on page 5, and I had $62,224 as the NOI, capped at your cap of 4.9% equal $1,270,000. Would that be accurate?
I
did it twice.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's what you were asking, Mr. Borton, possibly.
Well,
Anyway,
actually, I was actually asking only about the incomes.
Okay, but that's the workup based on. Okay. Mr. Borgstrom, I guess your turn.
Just to answer the member's question, the rents in here, and I'm looking at the December 31st, 2017 rent roll. There's a range. Each apartment does not have exactly the same renewal date. And so rent increases will be staggered through the year. But I can tell you that as of December 31st, 2017, the rents in this property per suite range, this is excluding parking, just the apartment rental rates range from $648 to $665 per suite. So we have included, I think, on page 13, I've included there December 31st, 2017. They're showing an average of $669. I'm not sure how they got there other than to suggest that they've included parking. So, but I can tell you in looking at the rent roll as of that date, $648 to $665.
Thank you, Mr. Borgstrom. Okay.
So this particular property, and we're going to see, I think, the same thing with the next one. We have another typical 2.5-story walk-up. It's located on Lyndale Drive off of St. Mary's Road, just south of the intersection with Marion, near Poolins. You've got a little jog there. This is a 16-suite apartment building with 6 parking stalls. So that, in addition to just the age and the occupancies, affects the attractiveness, and I suggest it also affects the risk associated with this building as well. So again, turning to page 22. Built in 1955, as the assessor indicated, we've gone through a process of stabilizing the incomes and the expenses. The incomes were stabilized for net operating income about $3,500 less than the cities, and that's based on something under $1,000 per suite for repair and maintenance. You recall earlier I talked about repair and maintenance when the assessor was asking about the capitalization rates. Higher rents typically, or a building to attract higher rents, typically will require a greater investment in terms of repair and maintenance. This isn't one of those buildings. So it's less than $1,000 per suite per year. So again, based on its age of 1955, we think that 6% is the rate, capitalization rate based on our capitalization rate study. So we're looking for a reduction to $1,008,000 based on all of that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Boardroom. Any questions, Mr. Wong?
No questions.
Lori, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
You, Richard, any questions?
Thank you.
I have no questions either. Requirement for summary, Mr. Wong?
No.
Okay, Mr. Boardroom?
Thank you, no.
You're good.
But thank you for asking.
All right. You'll never let me forget, will you?
I have one of those short memories, so I'll walk out and be wrong.
I know. Okay, that concludes 11 Lindale Drive. Last property on the docket, 17 Lindale Drive. We're dealing with a 2020 realty assessment. And no issues. Mr. Wong, when you are ready, please.
Okay, the subject property is 17 Lindale. The number is 060-912-48000. It's a residential apartment block that's 2 stories high. It's built in 1955 and it has 16 suites with 6 outdoor parking stalls. On page 3 is our income valuation summary. We use an average rent of $691. We have potential income of $132,000. We use the 1.8% vacancy to get an effective gross income of $130,000. We use the 49% expense ratio to get a net operating income of $66,000. Capped at 4.9%, we have an estimated market value of $1,305,000, which is about $84,000 per unit. On page 4 are our rent comparables, and the rents we've used are in line with the market. On page 5 is a summary of the income and expenses submitted by the owner. Their estimated operating income is about $73,000, which is a little bit higher than what the model is estimated at $76,000. In estimating their income, I didn't use their 2017 expenses. Their repair and maintenance is fairly high. On page 6 and 7 is information on how we derive our cap rates and cap rate sales. Page 9 is a picture of the subject property with its location. So their estimated actual performance supports the model, and they actually maintain the assessed value at $1,350,000.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wong. Mr. Boardroom, any questions?
for one moment.
Sure, no problem.
So if we look at your page 5, you've calculated the income for 2017 at $129,128.
Yes.
So if we take a look at page 10, where you actually included the statement, you'll see a line there just above the underline at the top of the page that says prepaid.
Yes.
So that's a rent paid in advance, correct?
Actually, I'm not totally sure.
So given that it's designated as prepaid for the end of year 2017, is that a line item that should be excluded from the revenue stream?
Do you know what that prepaid item is?
Well, I'm asking you. This is your evidence.
Yeah.
You've included it, so you've obviously looked at it. Is this not something that you think should be excluded?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. So it's fair to say then that you've overstated the income for 2017 on your page 5?
Yeah, potentially, but if you could shed some light on that matter, that could help.
Would you agree that it should be reduced by about $1,457?
Potentially.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the assessor?
I just do have one question. This apartment block looks exactly the same as the one we just reviewed.
Yeah.
Is it the exact same build, like interior? Well, obviously it looks the same on the outside, but same on the inside? They're just different owners.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah, I would assume that, I mean, it's the exact same square footage, so I think it's a twin type building.
And the numbers you gave us for this are the same as the one?
Yes. Yeah, they're 1.8% vacancy, 49 expenses, and 4.9 cap.
Okay, good.
Anybody?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Just one, again, missing something. On page 2 of your evidence, you have a sworn value of 3,350,400. You didn't comment on that at all.
Yeah, it's, I did not look into it, but it seems like it's not of the, not just for the one property. It could be a multi-role.
Because there are 2 or 3 side by side there, aren't there?
Yeah.
You've already mentioned it's identical to the one beside it.
The one beside it is in fact under different ownership.
I know that now, but I think the inference is maybe it wasn't in 206.
It's possible.
Yeah, we can't speculate. Okay.
Thank you, Richard. No question, Mr. Wong, showing that major expenses in 2017. Any permit history that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. All right. So my questions, Mr. Borgstrom, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. So again, look on page 22. This is our stabilization, the income expense history that you've seen all day long. In this particular case, we did not have a line for repair maintenance line item 27. We did not have a breakdown of the repair maintenance expenses, but in looking at the figure, I concluded that there must have been some capital expenditures in there. So for the purposes of stabilization, we disregarded that figure, and I stabilized on the basis of the average of 15 and 16. So that works out to 15,297, which, as with the property next door, is less than $1,000 per suite, so it's in line with the next door property. Based on the actual incomes and expenses and the capitalization rate of 6%. Again, if you look at the net operating incomes, our stabilized is significantly lower, to the tune of about $7,500 in the city. for $8,500, $7,500, sorry. So we're capitalized at 6%. We're looking for a requested reduction to $975,000 based on the economic performance of the property. 1955 building, 4.9% is not the rate.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Borgstrom. Mr. Wong, any questions?
No questions.
Lori, any questions?
No, I'm just noting that they're the same properties, but you're asking for a slightly different assessment on them.
Based on what they're actually performing at. Now, I can tell you that it's the same management company, which is weird, but different ownership. Owners make decisions to expend money or not. Sometimes it's required, or there's not a choice. But in these particular cases, this is what the properties are actually performing at. They both have 6 parking stalls. They're clones of each other, built at the same time, same size. So that's what they're actually able to generate. Let me just check to see if I got, I do have the rent roll saying that. Because I know that you asked on the last one. So I can tell you that the rental range in this property as of December, end of the year 17, actually differed from the last property. So the last property had a much tighter range between 648 and 665. This one actually ranges between 630 and 677. Oh, sorry, there's one in here at 750. Which to me looks like an outlier, but it's what it is. With most of them in the sort of 650 range.
This would be subject to rent controls, these buildings?
Yes. Yeah.
So
Nobody had them in place.
just a question, when a building sells, does the rent controls go with it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it runs with the building, and yeah, it would be, the reason that it runs with the building is that a transaction would then defeat the purpose
Yeah,
of
I
rent
can see
controls.
why, just wondering
Yeah.
if things aren't always.
Yeah, I can tell you a whole
what I might
story.
assume.
I can tell you a whole story about Proposition 13 in California, but I won't.
Yeah, that's a long story.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think they can increase their rents above the guidelines based off of if they have increased major increasing expenses, or if they or if they put a good amount of money into it, then they can do it. So it's yeah, there's a few ways they can do it.
Yeah, but this one is not undergone that rehabilitation process.
Okay, thank you.
Richard? No questions? No questions? And I have no questions either. Mr. Wong, with summary required? Okay. Mr. Borgstrom, you're good?
Thank you, yes.
Okay, that concludes our hearing. Thank you both for appearing, and you'll hear from us as soon as possible.